A long, hot August is officially behind us now, and next week Capitol Hill will bustle as both chambers come back to Washington. A continuing resolution is pretty much a lock at this point, but a lot of detail still remains to work out about that, and the fate of several other high-profile bills are still up in the air. Mike Hettinger is president of Hettinger Strategy Group, and Rich Beutel is principal and founder at Cyrrus Analytics. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming on the program. We were talking before we went on the air. Normally August is quiet, but this August hasn't been. Rich, why do you think that is this year?
Well, there's a lot in progress and a lot still up in the air. Congress has been its typical dysfunctional self through the last several months and the like, and there's a need and some must-pass items that really need to get resolved.
The continuing resolution is one, Mike, and the expectation is that it will look a lot like spending looked in the last half of the appropriated part of fiscal 2016, but that's not an assumption that agencies should make right off, is it?
No, not at this point. I think we still a lot of details to be worked out. We don't know, what it's going to look like. We don't know how long it's going to last. We've got a presidential election, obviously, in about 70 days. So all of those things are going to have a significant impact on what the CR looks like. And quite honestly, as I understand it, not a lot has been resolved related to the CR at this point.
The list is long. Time is short. Which is the bigger problem, do you think, Rich? We have the continuing resolution, we have a National Defense Authorization Act that everybody thinks will be vetoed in whatever form it goes to the White House, but that all still has to happen. And Congress is only going to be here till close to the end of September, and then they're out again until after the election.
Well, the National Defense Authorization Act has gone through every year for the last half century, and the kabuki that they'll be doing with the White House around that veto generally gets resolved going forward, but there's too much at stake not to move the National Defense Authorization Act forward. I think that's going to be a front burner item.
What else should we expect to see happen that might affect the executive branch in the coming weeks?
Well, I think obviously CR is one thing they're going to have to do. Rich mentioned the National Defense Authorization Bill, which I think they will get done. The conference committee's been hard at work to get that legislation in a position where they can move it through. And then obviously some things that we've been working on in terms of the MOVE IT Act, which I think we've talked on this show about before. That looks like it has a possibility of at least moving through committee here in the next month or so. So we're going to be watching that, and there's a handful of other pieces that I think will pop their way up onto the agenda as well.
So that's where I want to go next. There are essentially three pieces of IT legislation that are out there, three concepts. There's the MOVE IT Act, which you just mentioned a moment ago. There's the IT Modernization Fund concept. That's another separate thing. And then there's the megabyte concept. What do we make of all of these fitting together right now?
So megabyte passed a couple
3 weeks ago.
Right before Congress went out. Megabyte passed and was signed into law at the end of July. So the key on that is going to be implementation, right? What does the administration do? Do we need to make changes to the software category management program that OMB put in place about a year ago, and have that play out? So we'll be watching how that's implemented. MOVE IT and ITMF are going to have to come together at some point, and we're not exactly sure what that's going to look like, but Congressman Hurd introduced MOVE IT. Obviously, Congressman Hoyer had introduced the IT Modernization Act prior to that. At some point, both sit in the Oversight and Government Reform Committee. Both they're going to have to come together and cut some kind of deal if they want to move either piece, because as you know, the only way to get these things to move forward is either on the National Defense Authorization Bill, or if you do standalone, it's got to go under suspension, and both of those require essentially consensus.
Have we looked at the language of these pieces of legislation sufficiently, Rich, to see how they might wind up fitting together?
We have. We've been working with staff in that regard. Basically, what we want to do is to take the authorizing portion of the IT Modernization Fund that sets up a super fund using Tony Scott's vision of IT modernization and the use of a board of experts to decide which agencies have the most critical need and the most critical requirement. And we've taken that piece and we plug and played it into the MOVE IT Act, talking with staff about how that would work mechanically. Because recollect that MOVE IT sets up these enhanced budget flexibilities to accelerate the cloud first issue through agency-specific budget flexibilities, whereas Tony Scott's concept was to have a centralized super fund that would go forward that could be allocated to agencies in terms of new money. The two work together quite well and should work together. This is bipartisan, it's bicameral, and I think it's got a good chance at the OGR markup, which is the week of September 19th, to my understanding.
So Tony said at an event, Mike, a couple of weeks ago that he could see how these will wind up coming together. When I read that, I wasn't able to be at the event, but when I read that, I thought, well, that's a big deal, and it didn't seem to get a lot of coverage. Did I maybe underestimate or overestimate the importance of Tony's comment? Because I took that to mean kind of be a blessing on exactly what Rich just said.
No, I don't. I think it is, right. And the question is, you know, we have not talked specifically to Tony Scott, and although we talked to him a number of times as this process has moved forward, I was glad to see those comments. I thought that was the first time that we'd sort of heard that acknowledgement from the administration that the two ideas need to come together at some point. And that's what Rich and I have been pitching since Move IT was introduced. So I think that gives it additional hope that we'll be able to achieve the outcome that we've been talking about today, trying to achieve, which is to bring those two bills together and get it passed at least in committee before Congress leaves for the election, and then with the hope of getting something done before the end of the year.
Because, Rich, it strikes me that if Tony is saying my idea is open to modification, Congressman Hurd has said he's open to what might work with Move IT. So that sounds very promising for something happening by the end of this Congress.
It does, and I thought it was a breakthrough moment, because obviously they were committed and are committed to their ITMF concept and the concept of operations that reflects. But again, the two work together quite well. And the other thing is, this has got buy-in from Republican leadership, who's anxious to move something forward to reinforce Mr. Hurd's leadership, of which he's been an outstanding leader in this space. And to that extent, you've got everybody in a like-minded mode. So these ducks, I think, are coming together.
Rich Beutel, Mike Hettinger, nobody knows how to get this stuff done like you guys. Thanks very much for coming on the program.
Thanks for having us on, Frank.